Now that we have our data set up, we're ready to start doing some graphs. For most of the graphs that we want to do, we will be going through graphs and chart builder. Later in the course, we might look at some of the legacy dialogues, particularly with the histograms, because it's got a couple of different options that we can't get through the other one. But for right now, we're just going to stick with chart builder, and we can access a whole lot of graphs through here. So the way it works is you choose from your type of graph, and let's just stick with a bar chart for now. You select the type that you want and drag it in. Now in Excel, if you chose one of the bar charts, you could change it to a different one after you had the data loaded. You can't do that with SPSS. Once you produce the graph, it kind of stays that way. You can edit things like color and font and stuff, but you can't change the chart type. So you often end up doing a lot of graphs while you work out which one you want. Let's go straight to the stacked bar chart, but you could have a play around with a simple one. So we need to choose the categories that we're interested in, and that would be the passenger class. And then we want to set the stack color by, say, the survival. And just ignore that filter for the moment. Your preview is not going to be accurate, so just ignore that. And actually, if you've got a different version of SPSS, the colors are different. Okay, that's looking lovely. Now on the version of SPSS that you've got on the Unilabs, the default colors for this are really truly horrendous, so you may want to change them. To change anything in the graph, just double click and open up your chart editor, and then click on the bit that you want to change. So if you want to change the color, just click on it there. I've just made it worse. Click on the other color. Let's see how terrible we can make this. Yeah, that's pretty awful. I think we're done here. Excellent. Oh no, see what the other thing you have in the default SPSS is the background color. Yes, now that's looking truly, truly awful. So that's our count bar chart. If we want to turn that into a percentage chart, we need to do that before we create it. We can't, as far as I know, we can't go through here and change this into a percentage. If anything's changed and you figure that out, then just send me an email and let me know, because that would save me a lot of time. So in Chart Builder, don't change anything in here because we just want to look at the same graph again. And you can see that it says count up here on the y-axis. What we actually want to do is have a look at, I was just distracted because this layout has changed a bit. So this is called element properties, and it's in this version of SPSS it seems to be toggled on and off by this button. In your version, what you might see are some buttons down here. That's one that says element properties, and you can click that to toggle this on and off. So at the moment it's doing a count. We can pull this down and ask for a percentage. There's different ways you can calculate a percentage. You can do the percentage out of each class. You could do the percentage out of each survival category, so out of everyone who survived, what percentage was first, second or third class, or you could do the percentage out of the total. Usually I find that the most intuitive way to look at it is to look out of each x-axis category, and that will get you through most situations. So if you didn't quite understand what I meant about there being 3 different ways to calculate that percentage, just go for the x-axis category, which is the middle one. You must press continue, and if you've got the old version of SPSS, you must click apply, which is down here somewhere, but they've taken that out, which is lovely because I always forget to press it. You can't forget to press it. Press it now, apply. Okay. So now we have our stacked bar chart of percent. And although these colours are nicer, I'm just laughing because the survived is in red and died is in blue, and usually we use red for bad, so I'll have to change that. I won't make it look too horrible this time. So survived, we might give that a green or something, green for good, and perhaps the dyed, just give them a grey. Those poor souls, darker grey. No, not that dark. Not that dark. That's okay. You can probably make that better. So I do think it's important to pay a little bit of attention to your colour choices, just because colours do have some strong associations. So there it's much clearer now that you are better off being a first class passenger. So what else could we look at in this data for a different type of graph? Now we've got age here, so we might be interested in the distribution of ages. If we're looking at a continuous variable, we'll probably want a histogram or a box plot. So we'll go to Chart Builder and down to Histogram. I'm going to reset this, and again just drag in the graph that you're after and then drag in the variable. In this case, if the histogram is going across the x-axis, we need our continuous variable on the x-axis. Click OK. That's looking quite nice. So much nicer than the old version, finally. Now the width of each of these columns is called the bin size, and that's how we're essentially categorizing people into lumps on the chart. This is quite fine. I might want to have slightly wider bins, so I'm going to double click on that and double click again, and you can see that the histogram has been outlined in yellow, and up here we've got binning. It may have opened you up onto fill and border or chart size, so you'll just need to look for the binning. If you don't see the binning option, then it might be that you have not selected it, you're just somewhere here in the white area. So actually click on that data there. So I'm going to go from automatic to custom, and I'm just going to take a guess at 15. And that's looking quite nice. You can have a play around with that. And you can, if you don't want this information on the graph, you can take that off. Okay, good. What else can we do? Well, if we wanted to look at the gender distribution for age, we might want a population pyramid. Drag that on. Our distribution variable is the age, so you'll notice that now that the graph is going up and down instead of across, we need to put the age into the y-axis. The split variable is the other categories that we want to split it by, and that will be gender. You could also look at survival, I don't mind. And then we get our nice population pyramid. And it's just going out a long way on this side because there were more men on the Titanic than there were women. And we've got this little blip of babies. If someone could explain that to me, that would be great. I don't know why there were so many babies on board. So that is a continuous variable split by categories. The other thing that we might want to do if we want to look at one continuous variable split over categories is box plots. Population pyramids are good for age distributions, but clearly you can only have two categories because it's either going left or right. You're a bit stuck if you want to do any more categories. So that's when you might move to a box plot. I'm going to drag that in. So again, our variable is going up and down on the y-axis. We want our categories on the x-axis. Let's do survival this time. And click OK. And there doesn't really seem to be any difference in the age of the people who died and survived. So it looks like it was mostly driven by gender and passenger class rather than age. And these little dots represent outliers. So if you're not familiar with box plots, do please review them. In terms of spreading, what they do is they show the spread of the data, the lower 25%, the median, the box is the middle 50%, and then this upper whisker is the top 25% with a few outliers. And so the middle of these distributions is very similar, so there doesn't appear to be any difference here. So we've looked at doing categorical variables, we've looked at doing one continuous variable, we've looked at doing one continuous variable in categories. We might also want to look at one continuous variable compared with another, also known as two continuous variables. So we don't have a lot of options in this data set, but we could have a look at age and fare. So how much did they pay for their tickets to get on this wondrous cruise? To look at two continuous variables, we probably want a scatter plot. So I'm going to go to scatter, and I'm just going to start with the simple one. Usually we put the variable which comes first, either the exposure or the cause or the predictor variable or the independent variable, on the x-axis. So I'll drag that in, and then whatever came next we would put on the y-axis. Now there's not really a before and after with age and fare. The only possible thing I can do to justify my choice is to say that perhaps people who are older have more access to wealth, and therefore perhaps they can afford more expensive tickets. I'm not really expecting any relationship there, and there doesn't really seem to be one. It is interesting though that there's so much disparity in the price of the tickets for the people who went on the Titanic. So we can see that most of them are under £50, and then there's a few really, really expensive tickets over £500, which must have been a huge amount of money back then. So what we might want to do is actually colour these dots by a categorical variable, because we know, well, we would expect that the third class tickets would be cheaper than the first class, and we might be interested in that spread of ages over the different classes as well. So if we wanted to add another variable into that, we could use the coloured dots option. Now on the old version of SPSS you probably won't have this fit line version here. We'll talk about that in another class, but you should still have this one. So what this means is that we can colour the dots by another variable, and I'm going to colour them by passenger class. Oh, I don't think I like those colours. Let's just change them to make them a little bit clearer. It's the fill that I don't like, just to be clear. What if I don't have any fill? That's probably better, just because they overlap a lot. So if you've got lots of dots that overlap, then having them transparent makes it, oh, we don't want it blue, it has to be a different colour. I don't like that, but I'll leave it. Third class, fill. Having them transparent lets you sort of see through to where they're overlapping better. And I'll change that border. That did not change. Oh, I probably didn't click apply. There we go. And the border will change to green. I don't know why that switched it to the other one that we had, because it was green. Okay. I actually feel like that's still a little bit hard to see. So you could play around with that a bit more and see if you could make that easier to see. So what's interesting here is that we've got first class tickets going from right from the bottom all the way up to the top. So there was a huge variation in ticket price. The second class, they are sort of layering out in the middle, but there were some people like up here where they've paid as much as a first class person paid. And then again with the third class, we've still got quite a lot of overlap. So here's a third class person who paid more than a second class person, and actually more than some of the first class people. So I think if that was you, you'd be pretty annoyed at having paid that much money. And I guess the only other thing that's interesting here is that it looks like there were a lot fewer older people who bought third class tickets. So the older people were perhaps a little bit wealthier. And you could do that again by survival if you were interested in whether or not the price of the ticket and the age together influenced survival. So I'll just drag that in and replace it. I can't see any particular patterns there. That might take a bit more investigation. So have a play with those, go through some of the other graphs, and hopefully you'll be able to work out how to get some good looking plots out of SPSS.